Welcome back to the Foreign Report, your weekly foreign policy show that gives you the gory details of geopolitics with hopefully some laughs along the way. I'm Siena Gassner, your foreign policy curious host. With us is our co-host, comedian, director, Columbia Journalism School grad, Travis the Beard T-Seps Irvine.
The biceps are always present. The hat is back. The beard is growing larger.
Yeah, it is growing longer and longer.
Don't you worry. I'm
Are you going to Egypt to take part in the negotiations?
I am, and I'm also just got signed on as part of the Egyptian Comedy Festival, which I'm very excited for. I'm doing a whole Middle East tour, baby. I'm very excited.
That's great. Yeah, you got to blend in over there. You got to blend in.
I'm blending, baby.
I'm your FB Zaddy, and you all need to sign up for our newsletter. Send it to a friend if you like it. Thank you for all the people that have joined. We're going to put full interviews up there for members that signed up. All you got to do is subscribe. It's free for now, but sign up, and you'll get the full interview. ForeignReportShow.com. It'll be in the description of this episode. Of course, send us an email or a voice memo, theforeignreportlpn@gmail.com. We are having such a great time laughing in the darkness. It is difficult.
It's fun, because when you laugh in the darkness, you can't tell who else is laughing.
Exactly.
It's too dark. It's too dark.
It's funny, but I don't know where I am.
At least I'm not alone.
Am I? Today we've got a packed show, as always. The negotiations, as we just said, started between Hamas and Israel in Egypt. We've got a little historical context to give you. Got an update on the Venezuelan drumbeat of war, and some immigration and ICE updates. Ooh, goody. Those all seem like great news.
All right, let me just take another sip of coffee. Hold on.
Producer Danielle, we need to add good news. Remember we got feedback that we don't have any good news. And she's like,
That's true. And slowly my JD Vance news, while maybe lighthearted and we are obviously making fun of him, it's not always good news either.
It's technically getting worse.
He's next in line, baby. So
today we're talking about the Middle East. I want to start talking about the Middle East.
Great, I'm ready. Hold on. And Beard is ready.
Offensive.
Go.
So offensive.
What? It looks nice. I was told there was a pro-beard comment in one of our... the guy who doesn't read the comments informed me that there was a comment that was pro-beard. So I will take that. I will take that against the 900 comments that are against my beard.
That's good. Keep them coming, people, please. I was thinking about saying the Middle East, and I was doing this form. My production company's applying for I'll just say it here. We're trying to be a producer for the LA 2028 Olympics, and there's like a government form you fill out. So we're trying to be a producer on it, so we can like film content and stuff like that. And on it, it's like they ask about the CEO. That's me. They're like, what are you? Who are you? Male, whatever. I want to say all those demographic information, and then there's a drop down for ethnic, your ethnicity. And I always have a problem with this because I always usually just put other. I actually had a one-man show called I Am Other because I always have to put other. Then I never know what I technically am. But on this one, because it's L.A. in California, they had everybody. They had like 22 different things. And Middle Eastern was one of them.
Ooh.
And so I clicked Middle Eastern. And because I guess that's my ethnicity. And then I thought, what am I the middle of? The middle of what?
Yeah, what are
Travis?
you in the middle of?
What?
I know. You're in the middle of a sentence.
Yes.
And the world needs to stop interrupting you.
They do. Police.
Can I finish? Can I finish?
How many people got that joke, you think? How many people?
Well, look, anyone who loved Ross Perot as much as I did when I was a kid gets it. I always feel like I'm Ross Perot at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Can I finish? Can I finish?
My mom donated to his campaign.
My dad voted for him.
Yeah. That's great. All right, so let me show you this video that I saw from an Egyptian writer, activist, and physician that I stumbled upon. Her name is Nawal El-Sadawi, and she's amazing. She passed away a few years ago, but this video popped up, and it kind of blew me away and shook me up a little bit. Because everywhere you look, we say Middle East, Middle East, Middle East, but it's like middle of what? And so she's getting interviewed here, and the interviewer is like trying to ask her a question about the Middle East, and then she's like interrupting her and be like, no, you're not going to ask me this question until I tell you about this issue with the word Middle East. So let me play that here.
No, not Middle East. Yeah. Just a second.
Let me finish. And
no. I'm sorry. The minute I hear Middle East, I become upset. Because this is a colonial language. It's like third word, like post-colonial. Middle East. What? Middle to who? You have to ask yourself. When we learn.
What is the term to be
I'll tell
used?
you. Just wait. Patience. Knowledge comes from you ask yourself why.
Why?
Who called us? Why we are called Middle East? We were named, and we have to study history. We were named Middle East because we were a British colony. So Egypt was Middle East relative to London. And India was called Far East relative to London because India was also a colony. So now, when I go to London, I say I go to the Middle West. And people laugh. When I go to the United States, I say I'm going to the Far West. And people even laugh. But when she say Middle East, nobody laugh. You see? That's colonialism. That's colonial language that we need to decolonize the language. Go on. So you go on now.
Can I say the Arab word?
No, you can say North Africa.
Oh,
West Asia.
West Asia. So this was like a big thing for me that I'm not one to be like language police in general. I think there is, though, an interesting note to think about here of the language we use gets so deep and permeated that I, as an Iranian American, am like excited to put this selection on like an application. I'm like, I feel seen.
Right.
That's how much this language has permeated my identity. So there you have it.
I love it. And that woman is adorable. I mean, she's passed away, but what an adorable. That's I like my intellectuals old and adorable.
Yeah.
That's my favorite kind. Yes.
Agreed. Put that on your Tinder profile. Put that.
Well, and also update the age range. Old and adorable, please. Thank you.
All right. So thinking about that and this idea of how, Britain ruined everything, Yeah. This idea.
I mean, don't get me started, but yes.
Well, there's actually an old Iranian saying, "Hame cheez taksir Inglisiye," which means everything is England's fault.
Yeah.
Okay. And
you can ask everyone from their neighbors, the Irish, to the Far East, the Indians in India. It's pretty wild what they've done to this world.
And by the way, the whole Middle East thing, I can't go to these like Asian heritage things because they don't count me. But now I think I could get in because I'm just going to say I'm West Asian.
You're West Asia. Yes.
People say the Asian thing, they think of like China or like that East Asian, right? But it's like, guys, no, I'm in.
You're in.
I'm in. You're going West with my wife to all the cool Asian conferences now.
Oh my gosh. That's great. You have a fully Asian family. How exciting.
We're full Asian.
You got Japan, you got Iran, you're bringing the Far Asia. Wait, what are you? East Asia and West Asia together, baby.
Boom.
One Asia. That's you.
Can't wait till my son is like, "Father, never say Middle East ever in front of me."
Right. When did he get that British accent? Oh,
I don't know,
no, the British have taken it
again.
They keep ruining
all
everything.
England's fault. Yep. Trump talked about this 20-point peace plan, but he mentioned this 3,000-year-old war, which I have a problem with because in reality, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict took shape when like our grandfathers were teens, right? It's one of the most important turning points in history, in modern history, but it came after World War I. It came after the Ottoman Empire fell. It came from the British Mandate.
Oh,
and that's really
no.
what we're going to talk about today. Get ready, folks. I think because, we're in this like negotiating period, and aren't you all excited? Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are in Egypt now. And this is going to get wrapped up by the weekend.
Can't wait.
I'd say when this episode drops, we will probably hear Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff say, hey, we solved this bad boy, guys. We wrapped this up.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about hotel magnates and real estate guys doing anything in the Far East, Middle East, West Asia.
Most un-American thing you could say, T-Seps. That is so un-American.
I love a good hotel. You know that. But can they negotiate, and can I get more towels?
So in the course of this British Mandate, there was, and right after the end of World War I, there were secret deals, rebellions, promises broken, borders were drawn that were basically straight lines in a way, which is also hilarious. And this is going to be what we would say is the real story of how Britain and France literally carved up Mesopotamia, Palestine, and Transjordan in West Asia or the Middle East.
I remember there's a fantastic bit on the old Daily Show when John Oliver was still on there, and he was Sir Maps-a-Lot, and he just threw lines at a map and was like, it's done. Carry on. Time for tea.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what it felt like. Even like putting this episode together and putting this block together, I was like, oh man, these guys had no idea. And they were all drinking a lot. It's not like anyone was ever sober. They were all like getting hammered, smoking. I think they were smoking opium. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. They can't sue me for defamation. I'm going to say they were all high on opium.
The entire country of England sues you for defamation. No, of course. No, I've been to London. There's a reason the pubs close by 11 p.m. It's because everyone's hammered by that time.
Yeah, exactly. You get the drinking in early. And then...
in their defense, it gets dark at like 3:30. So I get it.
Emotionally dark. Listen, there was also this West Wing clip, and before we get into like the idea, I've also heard this argument that there was never a Palestine. There was never a Palestine. It's like, I don't like getting into this thing, and I also we're not going to go into like biblical Zillow. Okay, the Bible does not create real estate or states. All right, it is the magical book of spells. There were kingdoms and stuff like that. We're talking about the modern, contemporary way. States and countries and nations were built over the last 100 years. But look at this this quick clip from the West Wing. Man, love the West Wing. I mean, if you like that Ross Perot bit, you're probably a West Wing fan.
Right.
And if you don't know what the West Wing was, I don't really know what to tell you. You should watch it and think about this is what we thought pre 9/11 politics was about. We thought this is how like people made arguments. There was one episode in particular that I remember where it's like they were in there and it's like a Republican and Democrat arguing with each other. At the end, they were like, hey, that was like a really good argument. You convinced me. And I remember laughing
That's not
so
how it
hard.
goes anymore. Good grief. Yeah, there's an old phrase that especially politics nerds, we imagine politics being like West Wing. We worry that it's actually like House of Cards, and then you get in there, it's more like Veep.
Yes, that's great. Okay, check this clip out. This is the president, Martin Sheen. He gets a map of, the Holy Land. For the audio listeners, this is him telling Toby Ziegler, his head strategist, about this map.
Hey, you want to see something? Charlie gave this to me. It's a map of the Holy Land drawn in 1709. He got it at a flea market. It's hand-colored, copper engraved. He's going to put it in the outer office.
This outer office?
Yeah.
No.
Why?
What?
Why?
Yeah.
Because some people are going to find it offensive.
Why?
Doesn't recognize Israel.
It was drawn in 1709.
Yeah.
There was no Israel.
Right.
Israel wouldn't happen for another 250 years.
Yeah.
So what's the problem with the map?
Some people are going to find it offensive.
Why?
It doesn't recognize Israel.
Take lunch, would you?
It's just, how do you not find that, just delightfully hilarious and such... That was, what year was that? That was season 3, so that must have been like 1998, I think.
Wow, yeah, you can tell by the lighting, yeah.
Exactly, like nothing about that bit, you could put that today, the bit still works.
Yes, yeah. Well, it reminds me of my comedian friend Sam Talent, one of my favorite bits of his, that he doesn't recognize Israel or Palestine. With this prescription?
Oh, forget it. Yeah. So this is, Palestine is there. It exists, right? But it's not participating in the League of Nations, as it were. Everything is part of the Ottoman Empire at this point. And the Ottoman Empire, of course, that's present-day Turkey, or at least the Ottomans were, right? They had ruled the Middle East for centuries. Britain and France were already, though, seeing the writing on the wall that they were going to win, and they were trying to make plans for a post-Ottoman world. First, Britain, to turn the tide, they promised the Arabs something huge. Through letters between Sharif Hussein of Mecca, part of modern-day Saudi Arabia, and the British High Commander Henry McMahon, Britain literally said to this guy, we're going to give you an independent Arab kingdom stretching from the Arabian Peninsula through the Levant in exchange for revolting against the Ottomans. This is the Lawrence of Arabia story, basically.
Ooh.
Where it's like, hey, you're going to come and you're going to help us defeat these terrible Ottomans, and in return, we're going to give you your own place. So let me actually pull up a little map for the YouTube viewers here so that you guys can see.
Ooh, I was hoping you were going to pull up a clip from Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, no.
Beautiful movie. Not accurate whatsoever, though.
Yeah, right? Okay, so you can see on this map here, the promised land was like all the way from Iraq, all the way to Palestine. It includes Haifa, goes all the way down. And there's a big chunk in the middle of Saudi Arabia, but that was still run by a lot of different tribal leaders and everything like that. And it goes all the way north to the Levant, which is like Syria and stuff up there, okay, and Lebanon. All right, this is the promise. And as you could probably guess, the promise was not kept.
Oh.
Whoever thought? In 1916, while these promises were being made, Britain and France literally a secret deal that they cut together with the blessing of Russia. Diplomat Mark Sykes from Britain and François-Georges Picot from France agreed to carve up the Ottoman lands into not nations, guys, but zones of influence. This is a real thing.
Oh,
so
boy.
they didn't want to give people, they literally were like, okay, we'll give them a little bit, but we don't want to make them actually think they have a real country. They get a little bit of area that they can kind of call, but we're going to influence them so much so we can still pillage them for all their resources. It's another way of saying colonization.
Right. And
Zones.
you're saying they particularly use the term zones.
Oh, yeah.
So British, again. Anyone who's ridden on the subway system in London, known as the Tube, Zone 1, Zone 6. I mean, when you're out in Zone 6, you're in the sticks. That's what they say out there. I can't believe they're treating West Asia like it's the Tube.
So Britain would get Iraq and a corridor to the Mediterranean, so that's Haifa, right? And then France would get Syria and Lebanon. And Palestine, it would be placed under administrative control. So let me show you that here. Okay, you can see here that the top portion, right, this is going to be France. So it's Syria going all the way down to Lebanon and Beirut. And then the English get Haifa, right? So that's that port city because they wanted that so badly. And then the Brits also get all this stuff in Iraq and Basra. And then what happens is the independent Arab kingdom, the Saudi kingdom, they get it, but it's still a zone of influence for the Brits and the French. So they pull this deal on them, which is like reading about this is like absurd to me that all of this worked. It was like drawing lines across a map with no regard for the people that were living there, whether it's by religion, ethnicity, culture, or history. It's like exactly like George W. Bush in 2003. I don't know if you guys remember this, but like there was a deal that he tried to push where he's like, let's just divide Iraq by Shiites, Sunnis, Kurds, and Arabs. It's like everything will be fine. And so none of these things ever work out well. The reason that Palestine became this international body is because there was religious debate. And that's where a lot of people kind of conflate, I think, the old religious war, the Crusades, all this stuff. But this is a modern problem, right? There's old beef, but what we have is a modern nation-building problem because Hamachi's Taxir et Inglesiastic. Everything is Britain's fault. All right. Then we have, so what happens next? The Balfour Declaration. We've heard a lot about this when it comes to Israel and Palestine. Britain made a third promise, this time to the Zionist movement. And so Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour publicly declares Britain's support for, quote, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, while promising to respect the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities, Arab Muslims, and Arab Christians. Don't forget the Christians, y'all. And by the end of the war in 1918, Arabs, admittedly, they felt betrayed. Their dream of a single Arab kingdom had been quietly cut apart by secret deals, and Palestine had been promised to someone else entirely. Oof. So how are they going to, manage all of these? Again, drunk Brits are trying to manage one of the most complicated areas of the world after getting through an entire world war.
Right. So, I'm just imagining John Oliver's character, Sir Maps-a-Lot. Chop, 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 chop. Tea, tea, tea. Drink, drink, drink. Gin, gin, gin. Chop, chop, chop.
And so there was this thing called the League of Nations, the precursor to the UN, which did not work out so well.
Did not work out. A dream of then President Woodrow Wilson, though, to solve any future wars. Again, did not work out.
Did not work out so well. And they had this idea of the one big, beautiful bitchin' mandate system. And on paper, I guess it sounds
Is that what they called it?
That's the official term. You could quote me on that. Take it to your history professor, kids, okay? European powers would, quote, help territories transition to independence. What is this? Looking back now, Travis, these are almost comedy lines. Like, if you're in a meeting with these people and they said this to you, we'll help you transition, everyone today would start cracking up. But in those days, we're like, okay, we believe you, white man. Right. Okay, French, you have a very funny voice. We believe you. Okay, no problem.
They seem so trustworthy. But it does remind me in a less funny way of what your old adorable lady friend was talking about, and that is, it is colonialization again, right?
Yeah.
The mandates coming down from the colonial powers.
And so in San Remo in Italy, they had this conference, and Britain officially received the mandates for Mesopotamia, Iraq, and Palestine, including what would become Transjordan, and France got Syria and Lebanon. Iraq immediately breaks out in rebellion. Britain wants control over the oil in Mosul, and they imposed harsh military rule. And so the Iraqis start to push back, and guess what? That's what when white people come into your country and they start taking your resources, you're going to fight. And so
imagine
their solution, another hilarious joke that we have seen repeated so many times. They install Faisal I, a Hashemite prince, as king to avoid any things. And so to avoid any conflict, they're like, okay, you guys got a king. You guys are running yourself, but Britain is controlling this guy.
This is just the next stage of colonialism. Put a guy who looks like the other people there, but he works for us.
Yes, exactly.
T, chop, 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 gin, gin, gin.
And then Transjordan gets created because they learned the lesson in Iraq. They're like, oh, God, this is going to get bad over here. So the Brits take Transjordan. They're like, all right. And the League of Nations, and they're like, listen, let's exclude Transjordan from the Jewish national home thing, and let's separate it from Palestine. Again, more chopping.
More gin. More
and
tea.
So, again, 1932, Iraq becomes a country. 1946, Jordan becomes a country. So what about Palestine? What's going to happen there?
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be just fine.
It's everything. The mandate for Palestine gave Britain this very strange, dual, conflicting obligation. Build self-governing institutions for the local Arab population and wanting where they wanted both the Israelis and the Jewish people there and the Zionists and everyone. They wanted everyone, Christians, Muslims, Arabs, to participate in one unified government. Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's not going to work. The Arabs didn't want to participate because you're just telling them there's a whole new system that's being placed upon them now. And then the Zionists were like, we don't want the Arabs in there either. They're not very nice to us. And then, of course, there's a lot of this nationalism, this Palestinian nationalism that's coming up from the Arabs there. And then the other mandate, of course, was they needed to build a home, a Jewish national home. Brits also promised the Arabs limited immigration, but that still meant immigration nonetheless. So you have all of these conflicting things that aren't going to work well together. And I was trying to think of what is a good way to think about this. And I thought it's like if you were a dietitian, all right, and as I said to you, I'm going to put you on the Atkins diet, okay, no carbs, and you're going to lose all this weight.
Ooh,
you're like, great, love it.
Some
absolutely.
T-seps.
And I send you the diet in paper form, and it starts with pizza, pasta, sandwiches, and it's like, what am I supposed to do?
This is all carbs.
This is all carbs. This
Yeah.
is like, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to remove the bread? How do you separate? This has just become ethnically cleansing carbs from the land now. It's
Sure,
just
right.
it's terrible.
And your
I don't know.
diet tells me to only drink IPAs. What's going on
Yeah,
with
this metaphor broke down quick. But, I was trying my best, folks. This is a tough one. This is a tough one.
Tough. No, it's absolutely tough.
So people from Europe, people from Europe start coming into, Israel at this point, right? And or Palestine at that time. And early on, Arabs made up 90% of the population. By 1940, Jews were making up 30%. So it was like 70% Arab, 30% Jews. And so the Arab majority, this felt like an existential threat and you could see it happening everywhere. When you are the majority in a country and you see new people coming in and then government services being provided for them and there's all this stuff happening, you start getting more nationalistic. I mean, frankly, you could see it happen here in America.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah.
This is exactly what Stephen Miller is yelling about all the time.
And exactly. And why does things get blown up? Why do things get bad? When the public sector or in the government or in leadership is not taking into account everyone that's there, when they're not protecting the people or providing opportunity for people or providing safety for people or providing, a place where that's inclusive for all people to live and respecting the humanity of all people that are living there. So things started to get real nasty, and I think this is where a lot of people's knowledge kind of starts to begin, where you see a lot of the riots starting. There were, there was the Arab Revolt in 1936 to 39, and that started getting, crazy, where protests were against both the British and Zionist groups from the Arabs. And then Britain, of course, responded with overwhelming force. No surprise there. And then in 37, you've got this thing called the Peel Commission, which recommended this is where the first two-state solution comes from. And it said basically, we're going to break it up into Jewish and Arab states. Great. Wonderful. Everyone's going to peacefully coexist. The Zionists accepted it in principle, and the Arab leaders rejected it outright because for them it was still their land, and partitioning it was a betrayal. And so you had even more violence that happened after that. In years that followed, you had the British trying to figure this out, trying to drunkenly stumble through this.
Right, and
So
at
they
this
were
point, Winston Churchill's at the wheel, and Lord knows that guy drank all day.
All day. And now what else is happening in the late 30s?
Yes.
World War II. Another
course.
world war.
And I would imagine that a lot of Jewish population was leaving Europe, fearing rightfully persecution from the Nazis and thinking, oh, well, we have this place where we can go. And then they get there and no one seems to want them there either.
And exactly. And then at that same time, the Brits were actually trying to like flip the script a little bit. Now they were trying to pull the pendulum back the other way. They said we're going to limit Jewish immigration to 75,000 over 5 years. They were going to get Arab consent for any further immigration. They were going to restrict Jewish land purchases. So the Arabs were like, okay, this is great. And the Zionists were like, nah, man, that's not great. And then you had illegal Jewish immigration happen. Then you had Zionist militias starting to commit violence against Britain.
Oh, boy.
So much so there was this infamous attack in 46 when Irgun, I believe, bombed the King David Hotel where Britain had their mandate office, and they killed 91 people.
Yikes.
At that point, Britain realized Palestine was like, we can't do it. It is going to be a mess. And they leave.
Oh, they just leave. Okay.
Well, they leave, and then that's when the huge Arab-Israeli, the 1948 war happened, and we all know how that went because 1947, Britain announces that they're done with the mandate, they're handing it over to the United Nations. It's your problem now, and the partition goes into Jewish and Arab states with Jerusalem under international control. Jews accepted, Arabs rejected, and then civil war breaks out. You have the 48 war, and then, the Jews there, they won. They were going up against Transjordan, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and they won. And then what resulted from that was the Nakba, the catastrophe. And that's where the mandate ends. So it started with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and they just continued to chop, drink the tea and make a mess. And look, now they leave and they left an even bigger mess that we're all still reeling from.
Wow.
And now you know why in Iran, everything is England's fault.
Incredible. What a 30-year tragedy from the end of World War I to the end of World War. And within all of that, I would assume World War I and World War II would be the tragedies we'd be talking about. But there were so many other tragedies caused by the British Empire that, you think about just the way they ran everything, even in their own country. But from Europe, I know this is what happens to global empires, right? In a way.
Yeah.
It's all too hard to manage. And
it really is.
And it wasn't just West Asia that they screwed up, but, I mean, they had to let go of their India colonies. I mean, post-World War II was a real-time reflection for England, and it sounds like their decision was like, well, not a problem. Carry on. Keep calm, carry on. Have another scotch, boy.
It's incredible. And then, now they're like Brexit. It's always funny. I think until Brexit, I was one of these people that was like, if you have a British accent, I immediately think you're smart. I think you're a smart person.
Right.
And then Brexit happened. I was like, oh, opposite now. Opposite.
Yeah.
Total opposite. But if I would have known more about history, I'd been like, wow, it's a mess. You got a British accent. I hear bad management.
Right.
So-
Well, it's always interesting, too. I mean, I'm here in Ohio. My dad and I are big Winston Churchill enthusiasts because his speeches were so inspiring. It inspired the entire country, England and Great Britain, to fight back against the Nazis. But then, by the end of the night, Winston Churchill was hammered the entire time. He'd have champagne for breakfast, scotch for lunch, and brandy till wee hours of the night. Even the British politicians back then said that they wouldn't let Winston Churchill drive their bicycles.
Jesus.
It's fine. He saved us from the Nazis.
Well, on that note, I hope you all get a little bit of context because I think in times when there's going to be a lot of breaking news that comes out about all the different permutations, and the other reason I think it's important to talk about this stuff is that people in West Asia, especially in Iran, they talk about history like it happened last weekend. They talk about thousands of years of history like it just happened. This is how internalized the history of that region of the world is to the people that live there. And so when these negotiations are happening, they are going to be like the history will be in the room with them. And so it's important for us to kind of ground ourselves in that too when we're analyzing or judging or reacting to what could be coming out from these negotiations. And, I hope at the end of the day it's just a ceasefire and that there's a path to a statehood for the Palestinian people. But as I've said before, don't get optimistic.
Still, it's a very good point that you made. It's not just 3,000 years. It was a particular chunk of 30 years that got us to where we are right now.
Insane.
I need a gin and a scotch and a tea. real quick,
the teeth
to
mix it
recover.
all up.
That's what the British Empire does to me. Glug, glug, glug.
It's a British hurricane. All right, I'm Siena Gassner, Travis Irvine. This is the 4 Report. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the 4 Report. I'm Siena Gassner, Travis Irvine in the virtual studio. Oh, man.
This is all gin. For those watching on YouTube, I am drinking an entire glass of gin right now.
I love a martini, by the way. I love a gin martini.
Oh, well, you should try gin warm and straight. Not as good, but very British.
I was in Amsterdam and I had like ice cold gin. It was the cleanest thing.
It's actually quite good. London gin is tasty, which explains, again, everything you just said about their foreign policy.
Have you been drinking?
Oh, what do you mean you haven't been drinking since 9 a.m.?
For the Brits out there. Oh, by the way, Wales is not part of England. I just want to make sure that was a comment that I didn't read.
I also didn't read the comment that you definitely didn't read, and I want to say apologies to my Welsh friends.
Yes.
Of which I think I have one.
You got one?
Yeah, Tom from Columbia Journalism School.
Hey, Tom.
Welsh Tom. He used to speak that Welsh. It's an elven-sounding language. It was beautiful. Miss Tom.
That seems prejudice. Okay. Listen, folks, we haven't talked about the flotilla much at all. Because there weren't a lot of, like, I know, I don't want to be, like, glib about this, but for me, there weren't a lot of, like, ton of geopolitical consequences to the flotillas. They were pretty focused. It was terrible how these folks have been treated. But I figured a lot of you had been seeing it on the news. I don't know if you needed necessarily our take on it. It's pretty obvious. It's disgusting how they've been treated. And it's crazy that they can't just get some baby formula into Gaza. But one of the things I did just recently see is that Italy is on a general strike because of the flotillas. So last Friday, Italians took to the streets in 29 unique locations to declare solidarity with the people of Gaza. The Italian government says the turnout was 400,000 people, but trade unions claim the number was closer to 1.5 million people. The timing of the strike was instigated by Israel's continued denial of aid into Gaza, with the Israeli military again boarding and turning away a flotilla of supplies. The flotilla carried 40 Italians alongside other European politicians and activists. 4 have been deported back to Italy. 40 remain in custody. There was an Italian ship that was escorting them, and then that ship got turned around. And so this is like important because, you know, you could say the Italians don't have a dog in this fight other than just speaking up for humanity. And I will say Italians go on strike quite a bit, but this I think is a big deal. They go on strike for like their own, you know, their own lives and stuff. This is a big deal that the Italians did this. And they have a very conservative prime minister. And so I think this is something to watch as other countries start to speak out against what's happening. And we always want to keep an eye on the aid that is going in. We've talked about the aid that the trucks are going in, that it's more than it was before. It's like double that it was before, but it's still half as much as it was before they shut everything down. So there's still a huge disconnect between the amount of aid that is going in now and where it was before. And ideally, from these negotiations, that you'll have the United Nations be able to go in and, like, you know, actually do the aid as opposed to sending it to these 4 very poorly run Costcos.
Right, the worst run Costcos. My goodness,
The worst. And, you know, Costco's great, but, like,
did Costco make it into the 20-point plan?
I hope so.
Can we count on Jared Kushner landing this plane for us?
Yeah, that would be really nice. Okay, so other story I wanted to cover. Trump calls off diplomatic outreach to Venezuela. This Venezuelan thing is blowing my mind, okay? When I first saw it, I was like, is he just drumming up a war out of nowhere and just casually committing war crimes?
No, he's a peace president. He's a peace president.
And they've, they don't like Maduro. I get it. He's not a great guy, authoritarian, which they should probably find a lot of, kismet with. But the administration promised no wars, is threatening literally to escalate military activity that could attempt a regime change in Venezuela. And if we know anything, going all the way back to the 1953 coup of Mossadegh in Iran, regime change always ends up good.
Especially in West Asia or South America.
Yeah.
Always good.
And there was a clip, we don't have it, but like Rand Paul was on the news talking about this, and he was saying that when they do bust these ships coming from Venezuela, like before, 25% generally are not drug dealers, like they're not drugs on it, right? They have a lot of drugs that they get, but 25% of them are just fishermen, or they have nothing on the boats, right? They're not drug runners. And so he was saying, of the 4 boats bombed, 21 are dead. So if they're bombed 4 boats and those numbers still hold up, one of those boats was filled with non-drug dealers. And so we've not been presented, at least Rand Paul has not been presented, any evidence as to who these people were on any of these boats or anything that's been used as evidence to commit these extrajudicial military strikes in open waters against people. And so now the fishermen are literally afraid in Venezuela to go out and fish.
Oh, no.
The AP report one local fisherman saying, fishing in fear has become the new reality, which is like, what? Talk about deadliest catch. Jesus. Oh, God.
Good one, Siena.
I did not want to say that. I don't know. When that came out,
when the
that's
news
gonna be in the
gets
show.
terrible, we try to make it bearable.
Here's a clip from JD Vance, which is going to be a great bridge to our final segment here.
I love it. I love that he's starting to take over the whole show, that jerk.
Yeah.
I will say
sure.
his eyeliner in this, for people who can't see it, his
Wow.
eyeliner in this clip, on point.
For a guy that doesn't like drag queens.
Maybe he's born with it.
Maybe. There's born with what? That eyeliner?
Yeah, or maybe it's Maybelline is usually the
I think, I'd say you're right about that. Okay, let's listen to JD Vance talking about the fishermen.
Said Secretary of Defense, but our new Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. And I was talking to Secretary Hegseth, and you know what he said? He said, you know what, Mr. Vice President? We don't see any of these drug boats coming into our country. They've completely stopped. And I said, I know why. I would stop too. Hell, I wouldn't go fishing right now in that area of the world. But that is what a military that is dedicated to its purpose and a commander-in-chief that is dedicated to the national good can do.
That's terrifying.
If we just have our actual government fighting for the interests of Americans and nobody else, we can make this country safer, we can protect your jobs, we can make sure you've got the best wages anywhere in the world, and we can stop this terrible poison from coming into our country. We just needed a president who was willing to fight for you, and now we've got one.
What?
Yikes.
All you gotta do is just commit a few war crimes and everything's fine.
Just commit a few war crimes.
Just commit a few. It's not a big deal. It's just some extrajudicial killings. I had a problem with Obama's drone wars, but at least they had documentation on at least some of the stuff that they were doing. At least there was some paperwork involved over there. And mind you, even then it was not very good. And I remember the New York Times reported like the same person being killed in a drone strike like 3 different times. But this is that on steroids. Yes. Okay? And this is, again, weak leadership. Send your Marines to board the boats. Find the people. Show us who they are. Show us the win. If you're so tough, Mr. War, Micro Petey, Secretary Micro Pete, go out there, send your Marines to actually get us some evidence. This is crazy.
Yeah, and of course, JD Vance justifying it all by saying, I wouldn't go fishing over there either. It's like, please, JD, when you do go fishing, we all know you do it in southern Ohio and you have the departments raise the water level so you can catch more fish and impress your family. I get it.
I can see him standing next to like a fish and wildlife guy and just be like, load that truck of salmon in. Load it in.
Yeah, load it in. Look at this one, how big it is.
Whoa.
Yeah. Exactly. They're just handing him pre-caught frozen fish. He's like, I caught another one. Sure glad I'm not fishing down in the Caribbean right now.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, it's going to be the JD Vance Corner. I'm Siena Gassner for Travis Irvine. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Forward Report. I'm Siena Gassner for Travis Irvine in the virtual studio. It's time. You know it. It's the JD Vance Corner.
Give him a chance. He's JD Vance. No, wait, he sucks.
Boo-hoo.
He still sucks.
That stock is plummeting. How do we bet on how much people hate that man?
Well, we're going to get to it because that clip you just saw, I mean, again, the crowds still love him, right? He's justifying, we've said this all along for the last few months, that he goes out there, he justifies the Trump administration's policies. We're bombing boats. That sounds bad. Rand Paul's even not happy. Well, guess what? We're not going fishing down there, I'll tell you that much. Isn't that right, Micro Pete? That's how JD goes out there and justifies everything. So, Again, like you said, JD, potentially the heir apparent of the MAGA movement, he's going to be very busy for the next 3.5 years. That's the only joy we can really take from any of this.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't just explaining the Venezuelan boat strikes. He also had to recently explain here on the domestic front the shutdown of the federal government. Here is JD Vance taking the podium in the White House briefing room, a spot where, if he's the next president, he's going to have to do a lot more of this. So they're giving him his reps. He's getting his reps in. And this is him talking about the shutdown. Now, a little bit of background here, Siena. Again, we're a foreign policy show, but as we know, all foreign policy is domestic policy. The federal government's been shut down as of this recording for about a week. The reason why Senate Democrats are not negotiating with Republicans in the Senate is that the Democrats in the Senate are literally just fighting for what seems like a scrap of a piece of anything with the Republicans, but they want to extend health care credits. Obviously, we just had $1 trillion cut from Medicaid over the next 10 years from the big, beautiful bill. So the Senate Democrats are saying, hey, let's work together to avoid the shutdown. But now there is a shutdown, but let's reopen the government. But if you want our votes, you got to give us some health care. The Republicans are saying they're not going to do it because the people who receive that health care, and it's not that many, by the way.
It's the subsidies
Yes, the subsidies for the healthy, the things that fund the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, things like that. The Republicans are saying, well, illegal immigrants get a lot of that health care. And they're saying we don't want to give taxpayer dollars to illegal immigrant health care. Now, again, this is so far-fetched from what's actually happening. As you know, we've talked on this show, illegal immigrants are not eligible for government programs in any way, shape, or form. But this has led our hilarious comedian president, Donald Trump, to literally tweet out memes, or in his Truth Social, of Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries in the House wearing a sombrero. And this is, again, I don't think anything sums up where our politics is more than this story of government shutdown. Like you were talking about West Wing, right? It used to be a time where they get together, hash out the details. We figured it out. But this is where we are. There's a government shutdown. The Democrats want health care for more people. The Republicans say, well, illegal immigrants are going to get that health care. And then the president decides to tweet out memes of Democratic leaders wearing sombreros. And now, with all of that background explained, here's JD Vance saying why the sombrero memes are funny.
Mr. Vice President, first two questions. Are there plans to meet Democratic leaders again in the coming days, or are you planning on plucking off senators one by one?
So that's the whole question?
No, I got a second question.
Okay, go ahead and ask the second question.
So the president's been posting some images of Leader Jeffries and Senator Schumer.
I saw.
Recently. You've said that you're interested in good faith negotiations with these leaders, but what message does that send? Is it helpful to post pictures of Leader Jeffries in a sombrero if you're trying to have good faith talks with him?
Oh, I think it's funny. The president's
funny.
joking, and we're having a good
He
time.
sounds
You can negotiate
believable.
in good faith while also poking a little bit of fun at some of the absurdities of the Democrats' positions, and even poking some fun at the absurdity of the Democrats themselves. I mean, I'll tell Hakeem Jeffries right now, I make this solemn promise to you that if you help us reopen the government, the sombrero memes will stop. And I've talked to the President of the United States about that. Now, to your first question, are we negotiating one-on-one? Are we negotiating in groups? Look, I will go to the U.S. Capitol right now and meet with Chuck Schumer or any Senate Democrat if it helps us reopen the government. Most of the conversations, in my experience at least, have been one-off. We're also, of course, relying on some of our Senate Republican colleagues who have good relationships across the aisle. We're going to do whatever we have to do is the answer. And I think it's tough to predict what shape this negotiation is going to take over the next few months. But I feel good about the fact that Democrats already realize privately the fundamental irrationality of their position. I hope that they're going to publicly acknowledge it.
All right, cut that. Cut his mic. Cut his mic. Cut his mic. This is so disingenuous, but this is what JD Vance is doing. He's explaining away. This is a Republican shutdown, Siena.
Yeah.
Right? We know this. Republicans run everything. They're in charge of the executive, both branches of the legislative. And again, the Democrats, to reopen the government, to just get a stopgap funding, you need 60 votes in the Senate, which means they literally need 7, 8 Democrats. And all the Democrats are saying is, we want some of that health care back.
If you look at why this is even happening, when they extended the 2017 tax cuts, they had to pay for them in some way.
Yes.
And so how are they going to pay for them? They can't take from defense. So what do? They take people's subsidies away for health care. People are not going to be able to afford health care. Millions of people are not going to be able to afford health care.
Yes.
And so they take from the most vulnerable, because those people, guess what? They don't have a lobby. They don't have the money to pay some fancy lobbyist.
Right.
But I'll tell you who does. The ultra wealthy or the corporations or all the people that are going to be benefiting from these tax cuts. Those are also those donors that are helping with those tax cuts. So it's almost like a math problem for the Republicans because they could negotiate even, but they've already sold. They already spent the money in a way. So I don't know how this is going to get solved. I think it's going to take the pressure of somebody. And frankly, I think what ends up happening is that you're going to have the FAA, these they'll be we're not going to work anymore.
Right.
And then the airlines are going to basically call up the Congress and be no one's flying anymore. So you're going to have to open this government up one way or the other. And they're going to give the subsidies. This is just, whatever. They're going to give the subsidies or negotiate some sort of subsidies and then go into more national debt.
Come on. Yes, and that's a good point. The big, beautiful bill also adds $3.4 trillion in debt more over the next 10 years because of those tax cuts. And that's despite cutting $1 trillion out of healthcare and food assistance programs for poor and lower class Americans. All right, can you handle one more, JD Vance?
I can do that. Yeah, let's do it.
This is just, we'll end with this one. It's just one more clip from this press conference. Again, JD had a joke that just crushed, right? He said, Hakeem, you open the government, sombreros, memes will stop. That's where we are in politics. But also, I want to thank everyone for all the positive feedback we got about our YouTube-only breakdown, including us breaking down of Pete Hegseth's speech. That is on our YouTube channel, YouTube only. Again, just a 15-minute highlight of the worst clips of Pete's Micro Pete's 71-minute speech. But it is interesting because within this press conference, again, JD Vance's job is to explain and make normal all of the very unnormal things that are happening right now. And so this clip, I think, really highlights that from the same press conference. Let's roll that beautiful bean footage.
Mr. Vice President, just going back to the sombrero, you said that the president was joking,
back to the sombrero.
Hakeem Jeffries says that these memes were racist. What's your response to that? And just if I may briefly go off topic, Secretary Hegseth yesterday made an edict about no more beardos in the military. Just wondered what.
Sorry, what did he say?
No more beardos. Beards. Oh, sorry, it's my accent. Just wanted your response to that.
I didn't see that particular comment. I thought Pete gave a hell of a speech, and a speech that really is just oriented around returning the American military to the very high standards that it has had for virtually its entire history until Joe Biden came along and decided to lower standards. I think it was bad for our military, and it was bad for our troops. When I was a young United States Marine, I did not have a beard. I am now the vice president, so I get to do what I want to do. But I think it's trying to
think for
re-implement high
yourself.
standards, and that's a very...
All right, cut his mic. Cut his mic. Cut his mic. I've had enough. I've had enough of this guy. Did you hear what he just said there, Siena?
Yeah.
He's vice president. He can do whatever he wants.
He could do whatever. I think that's a theme with this administration. There was a great clip from Stephen Miller that got played where he was talking about the plenary power of the presidency, which is so problematic. You are going to get roasted for that, buddy.
You're a legal guy. Please explain to us, plebes, what plenary means.
Absolute. It means complete power. You have all the power, which you don't, brah.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
That's not how the government works.
You know, Stephen Miller can't grow a beard, though, and he can't grow hair on his head, so...
Yeah.
JD Vance, fine. I will give him... you know what? I have my beard. JD Vance can have his beard. We won't be in the military, according to Micro Pete, which is totally, totally fine with me. But there it is again. JD Vance just explaining away all the stupidity of this administration. And if it works out for him in 2028, he's going to inherit all of it. And then he's going to explain it even more.
Let me just leave you guys with this one last West Wing clip.
Oh, please.
On the Palestinian flag Holy Land.
Let me ask you something. You may be the last sane voice around here.
Hang on, before I forget, that map that Charlie gave you, make sure you don't put it where people can see it.
I don't believe it.
Recognizing Israel's a pretty hot button, wouldn't you say?
In Lebanon, not here.
It's
It's
literally...
not like I'm thinking, God, I was going to recognize Israel, but now that I've seen this map, you know what? Let's just sit here quietly.
Yes, sir.
And this is your moment of Zen, everybody. Oh, man. What
I miss having
mess.
a president who smoked cigarettes. That was so cool.
Yeah, I do too. Oh,
Churchill drank, but FDR smoked a ton of cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's how you survive, folks.
Well, listen, folks, drop us a subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, rather. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter, foreignreportshow.com. We've got an amazing guest coming up on next week's show, which I'm super excited about. We've got more stuff coming to you, more types of things to experience, Travis and I, in raw form. So please, geez, that came out weird. Drop us a rating. We love the comments that we don't read, and we will see you next time. For FP Zaddy and T Seps, this is the Foreign Report. Thank you.